Hi there, this is Artsy Wisdom. My name is Diane. Thank you for coming by. I am still in the lower 48. As some of you know, I finished my mural a couple days ago, and I'll be leaving here in a couple days as well to go back to where it's cooler. It's supposed to be 110 or 11 today. That's pretty warm. But the mornings are nice. In the desert, the temperature range is just really high and goes really low. So in the mornings I go out and it's beautiful and I can walk or journal, sit outside, and it's very pleasant. July and August, not so much. Doesn't usually get lower than 90 degrees at night because of the humidity. But what you get with that is some rains and much needed rains in the desert, but it's pretty miserable. So today, I'm going to share with you my visions and images that I get during my meditations about things I'm curious about. Today's areas are mostly U.S. stuff. Except for, I was really interested in the Putin-Kim Jong-un meeting, and to see from their perspectives. I got into both of their energies and looked to see what they were thinking, and I felt what they were thinking, which was interesting. I also wanted to see what Kamala Harris's presidency will look like, because I do think if she remains the vice president, which she probably will, Biden will probably win, but I don't think he's going to make it through the full 4 years. So I wanted to see how she shows up in that role. Maybe she will surprise us, because some of you know I'm not a huge fan, but you never know. People do all sorts of things. I also was very interested in the progressive movement, the wokeness. There is a lot of pushback from all angles, and I really wanted to see the future of that, which is kind of complicated, but I got into that energy. So that was sort of interesting. And then also all things Trump. Will the Supreme Court give him immunity, for these two cases, the January 6th, the classified documents? And I looked into the judge's energy, and I got into that place, what they're going to be doing. I've read on that before. It's a little bit different, but and then I also looked into, will he be the GOP nominee? How the convention's going to go, because obviously Merchan's technically he's supposed to get sentenced on July 11th for the hush money case, or the financial crimes case, for the campaign financing, however you want to say, July 11th, and then the convention's I think the 14th or the 17th or something, and his team is going to appeal or request that they delay it till after the convention, the sentencing. So I looked into Merchan and saw what his vision is and what he's planning on doing. And I think that is it. Yeah. So thank you again for coming by. I love all my subscribers and comments and my new clients, and it's wonderful. So let's get started. Well, let's get started. So thank you again to all my new subscribers, my old subscribers and viewers who keep coming back and commenting. And if you guys haven't subscribed, please do so. I'd love it. And it means a lot to me. And if you could just check and make sure you are subscribed every once in a while, I think things fall off a little bit. I know that from YouTube. So just check that. That'd be great. All right. So I'm going to start off with Kim Jong-un and Putin's meeting. Now, in the past, so sometimes I get images that relate to food, okay, or other things. In the past, I saw Kim Jong-un as this very old cookie in this kind of old bakery that's been around forever. And he's a cookie that's, small and dried up. It fell behind the case in the back on the bottom. Nobody even knows it's there. It's dried up and hard. That's what I see him as. I still see that as part of him. And then also on the opposite end, I see Putin in his chocolate egg shape, kind of like a Fabergé egg, but an egg shape, but it's chocolate with some windows. And I'll draw a picture and I'll put it in here so you can understand what I'm talking about. But in that egg, because it's hollow, is this lovely, ornate something. I don't know, but it feels jewelly, whatever that is. But in the past, I've seen Putin's bottom of this chocolate egg get eroded on a conveyor belt, and it kind of has been crumbling. And this feels even worse. And when I got into that energy, I feel like Putin's, I don't know if it's physically or Russia, but I feel like it's Putin itself. It's really crumbly inside. It almost feels as if he's holding back. I know he's hiding what's going on with him health-wise, but I feel like it may turn like that. That's the image I got, was like we're not aware and there might be a sudden drop in his health, like really quickly. Time is hard, but I feel like that's a real possibility for him. Now, so I got in Kim Jong-un's energy first. And from his perspective, I feel them shaking hands. And he's looking at Putin's shoes. I have no idea what that's about. And I see Putin's feet. They're not that big, actually. And this black, shiny. They're very well buffed. But there's something about them. And I don't know if it's the brand that Kim Jong-un covets, or maybe it's the style. But he's something about Putin's shoes. Or maybe he's just keeping his feet down. But he's very wary. He's reluctantly wary. But he knows that Putin's arrival and the connection to Russia will give North Korea much more credibility, because, as we know, they're sort of the redheaded stepchild of the East. They struggle. The people are starving and all kinds of, And so, anyway, he's wary, but he wants to have Putin's partnership. So he's fine with that. And I felt like when I saw Russia, China, and North Korea, because they all are bonded in that continent there, and they're all communist or some version thereof, they're in boxes. I feel like they're all in these very square boxes. And they all have to connect. These boxes need to connect to each other because they're too small separately, even though those countries are massive. But they're all part of this boxed situation. Now, like that box thing, the suffering, the idea of suffering, the people are suffering, they don't have enough food, they're, the electricity goes out all the time, especially in North Korea. They don't have supplies, the economy sucks, and there's a lot of corruption, and they look like, in my mind's eye, I feel like all three countries feel like suffering is normal. Suffering is expected, and that people just have to deal with it. I know that's not pretty psychic. That's just, I think people can imagine that's typical of countries that don't have a lot. But they don't seem to value their citizens' happiness as a priority at all. So the suffering part, that was very important. So I think everything is expendable. They have their different goals at the leadership level, but the people, unless you have a lot of money, everything is, the poor people are suffering, and that's okay. It doesn't seem to affect all three of them, Xi Jinping and Putin or Kim Jong-un. They all, that's just part of the equation. So I'm looking at Putin now. I'm looking at Kim Jong-un, KJ, for all of us who know him so well, KJ's energy. And from Putin's perspective, I also, I said I saw him as this chocolate eggs, this kind of Russian Fabergé type egg, but chocolate form, but big. But I also see him as I could not get to the center of a Tootsie Pop or anything like him. I can't. It was like he had so many layers. Like, I don't know if anybody has seen the true Putin that he keeps within himself. Like, there is so much that he hides. I'm wondering even if I don't think his family knows. I feel like he's different people to different people. He's, he acts different depending. Of course he is, because he's sneaky, but it's almost like, I want to say, a combination of emotional trauma from childhood and also his training. He is hard, and that isn't news, but the layers, it was crazy layers that only you can't get him there. He's very well protected within. And maybe that just symbolizes no accusations, or he can't get caught in any criminal activities. He protects himself. People layers could mean that, or it could be emotional. It could just be nobody can see him. He's very secretive, very, very secretive. As he's looking at Kim Jong-un, he sees it as a small country. He doesn't see it as wealthy, which it's not, because but he sees it as a small entity, that he's just a greater part of this big alliance with China that he needs. So he's creating this group, or part of this group, to help each other, which, yeah, of course he is. But he needs support, and he needs that dark aggression with him to fight against NATO or other aggressive people. And that's part of the deal, is to protect one another. And if they get invaded by somebody, he's going to call upon China or North Korea to help. I don't know if China will, but they might sneaky do something. And when I look from Putin's perspective to Ukraine, it was really interesting. I don't know what this means exactly, but I see the country. Oh, but first, in the past, I've seen him bombing or running to attack by Donetsk, like in the southeast region, southeast. But on the north now, or north of Ukraine, closer to Kyiv, I think. Kyiv is more center, but I see him trying to get there now. I feel like that's going to be his focus. Not sure why, but that's going to be his focus. He also, when I looked at Ukraine from Putin's perspective, I see a blanket. So if you took like a blanket and laid it across the country, a thin blanket, it was kind of grayish, but thin. Underneath, like lots of movement, but dark, like rich soil. If you can imagine like things growing, or worms, or I know that sounds kind of gross, but it was a depth. And I think what I felt with that is resources, natural resources, or maybe farming, or, the grain that they grow there. Very dark, very rich. It wasn't dark in a way that was negative at all. It was like rich soil, very deep with possibilities. And so it was weird because the top layer came up pretty easily. It's like the blanket, and he could see all that underneath. And he totally thinks it's his. Totally. That is ours. So he's just trying to get at that resources. And he doesn't see the top layer, which is the people and the fighting and the commitment to autonomy. Ukraine is. It's like thin. He doesn't see that as a problem, or it's not as big as a problem that we might think it is, even though it's just in his mind, he sees it as something you can just lift up and get rid of. Although it's crazy because it's been really hard for them, but I found that very interesting. But he really wants to get at the resources, and I don't know if it's more access to the water, or just all the farming land. It's very rich. I guess it's the breadbasket of Europe, is one of the places they've said. So the purpose of Putin, I think, in regards to North Korea, is him to kind of bookend China. I know it's not quite the same, but he's trying to show this strength and this alliance to help him, for all intents and purposes, support his war and his vision. And I asked about China, and they are, I don't know why, but I feel like nothing's going to change in our relationship with China till at least 2025, which is only next year. But that whole group in Asia, North Korea, China, Russia, I don't feel anything's going to change with that group. It's only going to be stronger because they need each other for different reasons. North Korea needs credibility. Russia needs supplies. They need support with military aggression towards them, or, with them. And China, they're just trying to be a superpower. and everybody doesn't like the U.S., so they all have the same goal in mind. Oh yeah, I forgot about Ben and JLo. I messed that up too. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. I have it in my notes. Those of you who don't know me, I have notes. I meditate because I can't remember everything, obviously, because I forgot about that. So now I looked into Kamala Harris, and I saw her as, I don't know if, again, I'm going to draw this out so I can explain it. Like if you took like a giant wall, say you took a graham cracker and you had little squares cut out of it and you dipped it in chocolate. So it's like a giant wall of cookie, but it just has little squares. So, or like a waffle fry that has little squares out of it, but it's graham cracker dipped in chocolate like you would buy. And she's big like that, but that's her whole self. So I found that very interesting. It reminded me of sort of a, I don't want to say plain, but simple cookie, graham cracker dipped in chocolate, but it had these little squares in it. You could see through it and poke through it. But that's going to be her image or her personality as president when or if she becomes president. I heard these words, so entertainment purposes only. I heard her say, old man, unalive yourself. That's what, or from the outside, she's kind of hoping for ill health, or you know who. But she also realizes that he's smarter than people know. She's very impressed with Biden's intelligence, and she thinks that people don't see how intelligent he is. I see her sitting in the Oval Office behind the desk, very proud at the resolute desk in the Oval Office, very happy and proud. But the feeling I get is her leadership style is uneven and defensive. She lacks some of the deep character needed to create or to make decisions based on, I don't want to say greater good or big picture stuff that, and planning out goals for the country. She makes decisions, or she will, and these are all in my mind, my images, because she's defensive, or they're fear-based, or she's got personal goals. I'm not saying she can't make good decisions on certain things, but it's uneven, unpredictable, and I think that's the holes that I'm seeing. Like there's some of it that's really strong and resolute, but other parts, the squares are just like, she almost has like a background that is, it's not supportive of this type of job. It doesn't connect. It's hit and miss, for her. So she's unable, and that's what I wrote. She's unable to read the room. It's like there's a disconnect between her goals and the goals for the country, even though there may be good intentions on her part. But for some of it, I feel like the decisions she will make are not going to help her or us. They're based on other factors that aren't good. I'm disappointed in that. I do feel like she wants to do it well and she's excited, but she'll get, like I said, confused or disorientated about which direction she should go on certain things based on her own needs or past history. Let's see. All right, so this is kind of a weird thing. So I looked into the future of wokeness or the progressive movement. And I know there's always been people who want more programs, social programs since ever. But I looked at it in general terms, not one particular area like LGBTQ or trans movement or programs for the mentally ill, homeless shelters, or being lax on criminal codes or diversity. All these, those are all, I saw it as a wheel-ish. These are all spokes. These are all part of the woke or the progressive movement. And I saw multiple of them, but there's not one goal or identity. So the hub of that movement is missing. So I don't know if you guys ever remember when you have a bike and the spoke comes loose and it's just hanging out there. And that's what I felt. I felt like all these spokes were part of this larger movement of wokeness or progressive movement. And they have different goals. And they sometimes overlap. But I would say more times than not, they don't. And the Republican Party or other groups, conservative party or people, are going to cherry pick these different things and, of course, sound bites and tear them apart and said this is the end of times because there's women that are turning into men and men, children being forced to change their sexual identity, all these things. So they're cherry picking those. So I almost think if they want to, this is my advice to the progressive movement, is to solidify some of those areas and make them a little bit more palatable. Not that I agree with them all. I do have an opinion on certain, I'm pretty fiscally conservative, socially moderate, but I do have a viewpoint about what for the greater good would be, but I'm not going to share that with you right now. But I think if they would consolidate some of these like goals, and that would help move them forward or make them more palatable or market them in a different way. Right now, it's just all higgledy-piggledy. All these spokes are everywhere and there's no hub. So the progressive movement, to answer the curiosity in my head, I feel like it's going to fade, or the wokeness that gets ridiculed by not only conservative media, but people just don't like the change and don't feel, and I know this is what people feel, is they feel like they're being forced to accept this new reality because it's so different and it's everywhere you look, and and they'll find videos where people, things are being done in schools that they don't approve of or done in life, and they feel like everything has gone to hell. But I think that is a real issue, and they're not, and there's acceptance needed. I mean, as time passes, we all adapt to different people, diversity. I mean, back in the day, you couldn't even have black people drink out of the same fountain or even live the same life. Over time, we almost have to be forced to accept and adapt to the reality of certain people. That's fine. That's good. But I think what's happening now, my opinion again, take it or leave it, is that it's too much too quick. And I think the media is moving very quickly, and people see more stuff, and then groups on the conservative side want to, show how bad and evil or whatever it is that is happening, and they can make their argument all the time. There's always arguments being made on both sides. I've gone off the rails there. But I just wanted to say that I don't see the progressive movement gaining any steam. In fact, I see it reverting a little bit until they can consolidate some of their goals or be more strategic with their showings up in mainstream media. It doesn't mean things are going to, the toothpaste is out of the tube already. That's not going to change. But people's approval slowly will get better. But right now there's going to be a little bit of a pendulum swing back. The only thing is, I do think there will be next year money put forth more towards mental health, homelessness. Hallelujah. I just have to tell you though, real quick, this is a side note. I used to volunteer at a place called Tumbleweed, and they were a resource center for youth, homeless youth, ages 18 to 25. Kids that would come over the border under 18, had different housing. There was federal programs for them, but these kids, many of them were from the LGBTQ community, and they were expendable to their families, or they came from addiction, families that are seriously dysfunction and they abusive. So these kids, a lot of them didn't finish school, or they had mental illness, or I should say kids. Some of them, they're almost 25. 26 was the aged out, or the age that you aged out. But there were so many incentives and social programs in this place. It was a resource center. They couldn't spend the night, but if you needed a locker, or you needed clothes, or if you wanted to use the laundry, you needed to talk to a social worker, work towards getting an interview, getting your education. A lot of those, they had programs to help people get off the streets. But what I learned from all that was there is a need to control their environment, even if it was bad and people are stealing their stuff and they're living on the street and it's terrible and they don't have anything. Because of their background, they felt like the only power they had is to control their own existence. And by giving it up to a government agency or even a social worker or people or a job, it's a bridge too far. So there's a whole big dynamic, and plus there's mental illness and the education system, which, they didn't get the knowledge and regardless of a lot of different things. It's a very complex problem, homelessness. And plus all the prices and everything has gone up. So I do feel like next year, that was a long way to go. Next year, they will come up with some more strategies for homelessness. I don't know if it's going to be helping people, like subsidizing homes, or helping people with mental illness. But the problem is that's hard. It's a hard convincing people, some of whom are just focused on caring for themselves. I'm very rebellious. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. And I'm not homeless, but if I understand some of that. And if I was in a place where, anyway, I digress. But I do think that's going to be focused on and next year. And so that money will go towards that, because there is homelessness leads to crime and more drug use and everything. Off of my soapbox. So then now let's look into Trump. And Justice Merchan is dark chocolate. He's a wall. He's a backstop. And he's very serious. And he is taking this position or this job very seriously. Very carefully thinking out every aspect of his decisions. The impact on the country, the impact on the judicial system, the impact, violence and that kind of stuff. But he's really, really serious about the law. And I felt July 11th, I think he wants to sentence him. I really do. I don't feel, it's possible he could change his mind, but I don't feel right now he's going to change his mind. I do feel, because they're doing the interviews, I feel like he's going to sentence him on July 11th. They are going to appeal it. They are going to, he'll stay out of jail. But I do feel like Merchan's really serious about moving forward, mainly because I know it's Trump's first offense, but he's so unremorseful. He is so contemptuous of the process. So I do feel like Merchan will sentence him. I don't know, maybe the lawyers will convince him otherwise, and the only reason they would do that would be because of the national good, or the national impact that would have. I did see that I saw 4 years. I don't know. I saw 4 years and a lot of fines. And then I looked into the GOP convention. Oh, wait, go back to Trump. 4 years, but it would be some sort of version, not in hardcore prison, but some version of house arrest or held against in somewhere he wasn't comfortable. But I do feel like he won't serve that. He'll leave the country, sneak out somehow. I don't think he'll ever serve it. All right, so the GOP convention. I've seen that as a cafeteria food fight. It is so ridiculous. I see people throwing food, yelling at each other, sweating, swearing. It's just I just imagine that's what it's going to be. And if he does get sentenced a few days before, there is a minority group of Republicans who do not want him to be the nominee. And I know the delegates come from each state, from the primaries, and they are required to vote for him in the way he won the primaries, I think, how it goes. But I feel like there's going to be a movement to not vote for him. I think he ultimately will get the nomination. I think he will. There's too many voters that love him, and they're very voracious and vocal, and people are afraid of them, his people, his MAGA people. I think there's a process in some of these Republicans' minds that once he's in, that's all we care about. We get him in there, and then we'll manage it after that, and we'll change the rules and figure it out after that. That's all. They're trying to get in. That's it. And they can put in other powerful people and change everything. But I do think that it's going to be ultimately him. But I also feel like at the end of the convention, I got this sense that something won't be complete. Normally, back in the day, they had all the voting and the states held up their little signs and said, we vote from Iowa, we have 17 votes for Donald Trump, or delegate votes. I think by the end, something won't be complete. Like they will extend the voting, or they will keep it open-ended. Something. And maybe that has to do with his being sentenced and this pushback from a minority group there, who are really nervous about him being the nominee. Something won't be decided, and I don't know what that is. Or maybe it'll be something secretive that's not going to be decided, and they're going to leave it as a possibility. Like they won't file the paperwork or something like that, where they're going to leave it just in case. But I do think ultimately he'll be the nominee. All right, so Supreme Court. Now, I do feel like I'm sitting in Justin Roberts' seat, and on the ends, I feel like they are asking, I don't know why I feel bookended. Here, I feel like they're not going to vote for immunity. Okay, just, that's it. They're not going to vote for blanket immunity. But I do feel like they are going to, some of the justices will have an opinion that will give them partial immunity in regards to international situations, wartime, things that are very important. I know everything the president does is important, but there's something they're going to limit. They'll narrow it down, the scope of his immunity. But I do think that he won't get blanket immunity like a king would, or just divine from God. You can do anything you want, and no, that's not going to happen. And I don't feel like they're fighting that much on that. I don't feel like they're giving them, they're fighting that much. So that's interesting. Oh yeah, and I just saw Donald Sutherland died. I just got notification. He was 88. Very interesting. Remember him in the original movie MASH? He's a very interesting character. Anyway, okay. I think that's it. Oh yeah, one more thing. I did look into Ben Affleck and JLo's relationship. And in the past, I've seen their past life together. They were these two little Asian kids from hundreds of years ago, or maybe 200 years ago, or maybe even in the 1800s. But they were destitute on the streets, starving, and they were little. And I see them helping each other the best they can, but I'm seeing like 3 and 5. They're little. And this life was about them getting through some karmic debt that they owe each other through that life. But in the past videos, I've seen her can't get enough. She's taking everything in here, now, this life. It's like there's never ending, like she can't get satisfied, and it's a nonstop thing. And he's at the point now, and he deals with things differently, but he's at the point where he just wants to be and do things at a pace and enjoy the receiving. And she, or the, the settled nature of their lives, or whatever they can be as celebrities, but she's on like a rocket ship, and she cannot. I think she's an Aries with a Leo moon. So me, it all has to be about me. She's very self-centered. And I think she's got some other issues from childhood. But so what I did see when I got into JLo's energy, I felt sparkly, very thin, which I loved. I felt like my belly was very flat, very small. But I see her looking at him, and she looks at him like he's dowdy, sloppy, unkept. And he, like a flannel shirt, I see him maybe unshaven, and she doesn't like that. She's disappointed in that, and it makes her upset to see him like that. It's like he's an extension of her, and it's a very codependent relationship, I guess, but they were codependent. They were in that past life. So riddle me that, Batman. So she sees him as that. So she's disappointed. And I don't know, initially they have this bond, but she can't get over that part. How he is, how his exterior is, how he shows up in the world versus how she shows up in the world. She sees him as sexy, though. She sees him as a man's man. Like he's like a guy, like a sexy, the testosterone guy. And he's big, and she sees him. So that's a turn on for her. But when I get into his energy, I see her, and she's got all these people around her. She's not by herself. She's surrounded by all these people. And he is unhappy with that because it feels like he wants to be alone with her. I don't know if that's literal or just he wants them all gone so they can have that bond. But he sees her as gorgeous and sparkly, because she is sparkly. And he sees them as taking all her time and energy. They're not draining her. She gets invigorated by all that. But for him, I think maybe it's for his energy. It's taking away, takes their time together. He's just really disappointed. Again, interesting. They're both disappointed in each other and saddened. I see her moving on. I see her going more and more into the distance with her people. So I do feel like it's just a matter of time before she moves on, or she already has. She's getting smaller and smaller. Yeah. But it was hard to reconcile. They're just different people. And like I said, in the past life, they had this deep, deep bond, and they relied on each other. Oh, yeah. In that past life, I forgot to mention this. One of them was a little girl, and she dies. I think it was her. So I feel like part of that is him trying to hold on to that. And he may not be realistic in what that looks like now in this life. But he had a deep, love for that other, I think it was sister, friend, whatever, those little child. So I felt bad about that. But they have this karmic bond, and if they don't fix it now or finish it or resolve it, then they're destined to repeat it another time in some other way, shape, or form. Yeah, I think that was it. I wrote on here that karmic guilt is impossible to resolve at this time because of her resistance. And because we each have our soul path, right? And then our spiritual family come down. We meet each other in different versions of our soul, and we learn different lessons. Sometimes there's karma to resolve. Sometimes it's, brand new meeting, but you all have to work through it and come to some sort of change or resolving. Otherwise, you go to another life and it repeats it in a different form. Anywho, that is it. This is probably a little too long. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for hanging in there with me. And let's all stay positive. Let's all just say a prayer of peace and harmony and cooling. The whole country is hot right now, hot in more ways than one. Let's pray for coolness, temperature, and emotions, and allow spiritual oneness to take over, allow spiritual peace to be the priority for everybody in their hearts. And till next time, take care, everybody.